大家好，欢迎各位来到今天的线上直播。我是 Elsevier 的行销人員 Tracy， 很高興看到各位參加這場專題研討會。這次直播的主題是醫療決策的 AI 助手 ClinicalKey AI 如何幫助醫師提升病人治療效果。我們今天非常榮幸能夠邀請到日本 Elsevier 首席醫療官 Dr. Imura。他不僅是內科醫師，也是一位致力於幫助臨床醫師將高品質臨床證據融入日常實務的專家。他的目標是根據最新證據幫助患者做出最佳決策，並且與患者建立強而有力的醫病關係。今天的議程將包括30分鐘的主題演講，以及10分鐘的問答時間。直播期間有任何問題都可以在我們 Q&A 區留言，我們最後會幫您解答。另外，我們在 Chat 區會提供一份問卷，請各位踴躍作答。我們會後將從作答者當中抽取3人，送出精美的小禮物。Hello everyone, welcome to today's webinar. I'm Tracy, a marketer at Elsevier, and I'm glad to have you join us for this exciting session. Today's webinar is titled AI Assistant for Medical Decision Making, How ClinicalKey AI Helps Physicians Improve Patient Outcomes. We are honored to have Dr. Imura with us today. He is the Chief Medical Officer at Elsevier Japan and a board-certified internist. Dr. Imura has dedicated his career to helping clinicians integrate high-quality clinical evidence into daily practice, aiming to blend the science and art of medicine so that the physicians can make the best decisions for their patients while building strong personal connections. The session will consist of a 30-minute presentation followed by a 10-minute Q&A session. If you have any questions during the webinar, feel free to drop them in the Q&A box, and we'll answer them at the end. Also, we'll be sharing a quick survey in the chat box, so please take a moment to fill it out. After the session, we'll randomly pick 3 participants who complete the survey to receive a special gift. And now, let's give a warm welcome to today's speaker, Dr. Imura.
Hi, Tracy. Thanks for the kind introduction. And all the guests, thank you for coming over to take a moment out of your busy practice. Hello again. My name is Dr. Takeshi Imura. I'm a general internist by training. I practice at a place like this in Kobe, Japan. It's the home of the famous Kobe beef. And in olden days, Sun Yat-sen loved to visit the town. So we have a museum commemorating him. We also have the second biggest Chinatown in the nation. Jackie Chan once came over here to shoot a film. So Taiwan and Hong Kong have always felt very close to me in my heart. I feel very honored to be with you today. Anyhow, besides seeing my patients, I also have another hat as a medical advisor at Elsevier. Last November, Elsevier released this evidence-based clinical AI called ClinicalKey AI. It is equipped with generative AI and taps into perhaps the biggest body of high-quality, peer-reviewed, full-text medical literature in the world. I was lucky to be one of the first ones to test drive this AI in clinical practice. It has been less than a year, but it completely changed the way I practice medicine. More specifically, I am more competent as a clinician. I enjoy learning again, and I feel more connected with my patients and staffs. So that's what I want you to envision at the end of my talk today. Let's move onward. Force multiplier. This is the very first aspect I'd like to touch on today. I had this young graduate student who recently came to Japan. Concerned, he came into my clinic because his visa screening test showed a positive hepatitis C antibody. I ran the complete hepatitis panel, which unfortunately confirmed his positive antibody status, but his viral RNA titer came back negative, which was puzzling, at least to me. Probably we have hepatologists here. It's what you deal with every day, but at least for a general internist like me, it was a bit challenging. And I always knew I could handle such a case if I dug through the literature for 5 to 10 minutes, but I didn't always have the luxury to look things up. In reality, it's not always optimal to take on every single case on your own. For efficiency's sake, I'd normally give up and refer such patients out to a hepatology clinic. But this particular time, I was just spoiling for an opportunity to give a spin on this evidence-based AI. So I punched in his history, just like this. Very competently, the AI interpreted the clinical scenario and suggested that this was probably a past hepatitis C infection that got naturally cured. It also provided the rationale in concise bullet format, which looked very convincing to me. But as you all know, generative AI is notorious for hallucination. So I wanted to do a little bit more of tire kicking before applying it to my real patient. I scrolled down further. What I realized was that this evidence-based AI was not spurting out its answer out of a black box. Instead, it did the necessary literature search and summarized the key points very relevant to this specific case right in front of me. So I thought, wow, this is much better than I thought. Just to be sure, let me see. I put in another follow-up question. And now I was, one more. Here, just to be sure, I put in another follow-up question, and I was fully confident. I provided reassurance to the patient, telling him it was okay, no need for follow-up, and he walked out happy. I also felt very competent about myself as a physician because it had been quite some time since I had handled such a case on my own. That reminded me of the Steve Jobs quote, famous quote, "Computers are like a bicycle for our minds." In clinical practice, after several years, you tend to see the same types of patients over and over again. Yes, you might be efficient, but on the intellectual side, it could be a bit boring, to be honest. But with an evidence-based AI like this, it's almost like a bike ride. You get to see new scenery that you couldn't see on your own. It takes you faster and further. It brings in freshness and makes your clinical practice more fun and pleasurable again. I have another case. This was another young man, originally from Ireland, who came in to my clinic complaining of weakness and fatigue occurring only on hot summer days. I delved into his history and physical exam and realized that he had a history of temporal seizures, as well as baseline left arm weakness. Those sounded concerning to me because I once had seen a similar case before of a patient with multiple sclerosis who gets worse only on hot summer days. It is known as the Utrecht phenomenon. So I wanted to rule out this condition. And I knew I needed to order an MRI of the central nervous system, but what I did not know was if I needed to order an MRI of the brain alone or an MRI of the brain and the spine, if the MRI needed to be with contrast or without contrast. Those minor points used to be the last straw to push me toward patient referral. But this time, I thought AI could help, so I framed my question like this. The AI immediately did the necessary search and provided the answer right away, straight from the Goldman Cecil's textbook of medicine, the gold standard. More than 95% of patients can be ruled out with an MRI of the brain alone, so no spine needed to be included. And with his low pretest probability, I felt this was good enough. Another question. with contrast or without contrast. It actually has to be with contrast. That's what I learned. So I checked his renal function, BUN, and creatinine just to make sure he could tolerate contrast and ordered an MRI. The radiology report came back. There was no sign of multiple sclerosis. Rule out complete. I gave him reassurance. He and his wife walked out happy and reassured. I also felt confident, feeling like a mini neurologist. Now I love being smart. And speaking of smart, there is more to it. Actually, you can take back the joy of learning. Here's another case. This was a patient with subclinical hypothyroidism. His TSH was high, but his free T3 and T4 were still within normal limits. After the initial diagnosis, I started hormone replacement therapy, and his TSH fell within normal limits after a few visits. But as he walked out of the exam room, he stopped and said, "Doc, by the way, I've had these weird spots on the shins for the past 2 weeks. What are those?" I told him those look like vitiligo to me, and I could refer him to a dermatologist if it kept getting worse. But after the patient went home, it suddenly occurred to me that maybe vitiligo and hypothyroidism could have a correlation because both are autoimmune conditions. I usually let those thoughts pass and move on to the next case. But this time, I felt, why not give the AI a shot? I quickly took out my phone and posed the question, is there any association between these conditions? And bingo, there is a very strong link, a 3 to 8-fold higher prevalence. It's actually written in textbooks and review articles. The AI even pointed me to a large cohort study here that came from France last year. I was thrilled, not for practical reasons, but for the fact that I could learn from my own cases again. It kind of reminded me of my favorite medical teacher from my intern days. He was a surgeon who would turn any plain case into a great learning moment, no matter how busy we were. With evidence-based AI like this, you can also turn the 30 seconds between patient encounters into learning opportunities again. You can also apply this to harder, complex questions. I wanted to re-educate myself on antibiotic selection for patients with severe sepsis. I'd heard there were new studies coming out with conflicting results, but finding the latest high-quality review articles around such a narrow clinical question was always a challenge. Finally, I turned to AI, and it was much easier than expected. The AI immediately provided the key findings just in the way to fill my specific knowledge gap by ferreting out and summarizing recent high-quality review articles here. Those were all authored by world-class professors in this field. And on top of that, the AI also provided a pivotal study in this area from JAMA, hot off the press back then, the ACORN study. After I got the big picture, the last article on the bottom looked so interesting, so I clicked the reference and read the article to deepen my understanding. And this felt as if those world-class authors, professors, were lining up just to answer my little clinical question. And they are available 24/7, never get mad, and they even give you good reading assignments. And now I love learning again. Last but not least, human connection. AI can actually help you get human connection back. And this might sound a bit counterintuitive, but here's a tale. I was seeing an Indian gentleman who recently moved to Japan. It was a new environment for him and his family, at home, at work, at school. He was struggling, his son was struggling, and ended up with adjustment disorder that caused sexual dysfunction. That's why he came in with his wife. We agreed to start antidepressant therapy, but the thing was, as you all know, one of the common side effects of antidepressants is also sexual dysfunction, which was the very last thing I wanted to happen to this already depressed man. Traditionally, comparing medications was a painful task. You have to open multiple windows, go to different data sources, and jot things down on a piece of paper. But I felt AI could do a much better job. I turned to the AI again, and in an instant, it provided a clean apple-to-apple comparison based on FDA data and a phase 4 study. We picked the right medication on the spot, and the rest of the time, we had a great time of connection. I made sure that he understood me and I understood him. He, his wife, and I even enjoyed a little chit-chat at the end, and they walked out with big smiles. Then I felt like, this is why I became a doctor. This is why I went to medical school. Not to become an expensive data clerk attending EHR terminal all the time, entering data, or mini library and doing literature search on a smartphone, but to have a quality face-to-face communication with patients. It felt as if a huge cognitive load was suddenly lifted off of me. It gave me the leeway to enjoy conversations with my patients, perhaps ever since I was in medical school. Soon after, I also realized I started enjoying communication with nurses, clerks, pharmacists, lab techs. Now we touch bases more often, talk about how we could improve our system, and just simply chat more. I feel stronger team spirit and enjoy being a part of this team dedicated to providing better care for patients than ever before. Going back to the case of multiple sclerosis, there's a bit more to this story. After the patient and his wife walked out of the exam room, the wife came back in just to share her sense of gratitude, not only for the workups we provided, but also for the fact that we listened, cared, and were truly there for him. Well, I thought that's because I'm such a good doctor. We're such a good team. That's all true. But actually, there's another factor, that's technology. It played a huge role behind the scenes. The technology gave us the headspace to be compassionate and to be human. To wrap this up, there's a quote that went viral on social media recently that goes like this: I want AI to do my laundry and dishes so that I can do art and writing, not for AI to do my art and writing so that I can do my laundry and dishes. And this really hit home for me. I believe that AI, at least in healthcare, should be developed and guided in a way that allows us physicians and nurses and clinicians to do our art and writing, so to speak. And Elsevier is fully 100% committed to this mission, with a group of clinicians like me working inside together to guide this technology in a way that empowers us, not replaces us. I believe each country has a different healthcare system and unique challenges. And I wonder, what are your challenges? How can we make it work in your countries and at your hospitals? So if any of you are interested in exploring this journey with us, Elsevier, I'd love to work with you, talk with you, hear your advice. So that's all I have for now. And thank you for listening. And I'd like to open the floor to your questions and comments.
Thank you, Dr. Imura. Now we'll move into the Q&A session, so please feel free to ask your questions. 接下来的时间我们会进入问答环节，欢迎大家提出您的问题。Yeah. Oh, Dr. Imura, there's one question. As both of a clinician and a school teacher role at the same time, how do you think CKAI can help clinical staff, school teachers, and students simultaneously?
Oh, education. That is a wonderful question. I've been thinking about that, but I believe CKAI accelerates learning on multiple levels. Just as I showed you in the examples, it actually summarizes the key findings right away in a very concise format. And it's also attributable to high quality peer-reviewed articles. So interestingly, I thought people would slack off with AI, including me, because it gives you very summarized answer right away in a conversational format. But when something is trackable, actually, at least for me, I read more often than before because you spend less time searching for the necessary literature and you have more time to read. So I believe that evidence-based AI like this, that is connected to reference sources, will actually accelerate learning for any level of students and trainees.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
There's a Dr. Imula. There's another question. Hi, Dr. Imula. Thanks for the perfect sharing. By using the AI system, is there anything we need to pay more attention? Thanks.
Pay more attention. Well, I guess this question can go to multiple directions. But the first thing that comes to mind is that probably the shift in competency of physicians is what I am foreseeing right now. The medical education traditionally, like 1970, 1980, basically they expected doctors to be like books, like reservoir of knowledge. So physicians were expected to memorize and contain as much information as possible. But around 2000, we had search engine technology. We had Google and ClinicalKey, and a lot of things got searchable. So after that, we still have to memorize things to build our baseline body of knowledge to understand things. But the medical education, I believe, has changed its focus to more problem solving. And you can search and find minute details. And with that said, with the advent of AI, I believe physicians have to be more kind of in the supervisory role than frontline workers. AI says something and it's very accurate, but it's not 100%, it's not always 100% accurate or 100% appropriate to the patient right in front of you, because there's certain nuance and subtlety that only humans can capture. And you can't type every single thing into a chatbot window. So human plays a huge role in to make sure that the recommendation and the references that the AI is suggesting are correct and appropriate for the patient or not. So in order to do that, you can't just swallow what AI says. And instead, you have to develop strong pathophysiology understanding or statistical understanding to critically appraise the rationale of the AI's recommendations. That's the type of shift I'm about to see. I hope that's the direction that you're expecting. And if there's any other direction that you have in mind, please feel free to share.
Okay, another question. Is there a limit to the length of the question that can be asked?
For current version of ClinicalKey AI, if that's what you're asking, yes, there's a limit. There's a word limit. I guess it's approximately 300 words or something like that. So physicians have to be able to summarize the clinical picture and has to call out what's important, what's pertinent. I believe you have seen like medical students or interns, they go take history in a certain case, like let's say in an emergency room or something, and they tell you one thing, but when you actually go ask them, you actually get a whole different history because the patient responds differently according to how what questions you ask. And also, depending on what you think is pertinent, how you summarize those one-liner or one-minute presentation can be different. And the same thing applies here when you make use of ClinicalKey AI. So the physician's ability to discern what are pertinent for the specific case in front of you matters a lot when you make use of AI. So that's one answer. Just to add, actually you can do, but there's word limit, but you can do follow-up question one after another, and there's no limit. So you can provide the first question and you get the answer, and you can dig deep, just as I showed you in the video demo.
Another question, does ClinicalKey AI have an API to integrate with?
Whoa, that is a bit beyond my wheelhouse. I don't have an engineering degree. I only have MD. But what I heard from the technical person is that this ClinicalKey is HL7 Fire compatible. I heard that's the standard format or protocol that is used for EHR worldwide. So technically speaking, as long as your system is compatible with HL7 Fire, Clinical AI should be able to integrate it into your system, cost aside.
Okay. And how do you think CKAI can help hospital decision makers?
Oh, that is another great point. I'm not a salesperson, and unfortunately, I have never been a president or vice president of a hospital. I'm a frontline clinician taking care of patients, so there's a lot of guesswork here. But all the excuses aside, I believe I guess for decision makers, I guess efficiency is one, and the teamwork part also matters. So let me start with the decision-making part. So as I told you before, I'm way more efficient and much more capable than before. So I can look up things much faster and I can handle complex cases. So that means less referral and less waiting time for patients. So hospital can be efficient. So as a frontline clinician, I'm hoping that those presidents and vice presidents take it other way and make me see twice more patients. That's the hope I'm having. But you will be efficient, so that's one. And the other part, the teamwork part, we don't have very hard data here yet, but there are actually a lot of narrative studies published in high impact factor journals too. The AI helps you lift off cognitive burden, just as I mentioned, and you can channel that for better communication or system improvement. So you can have stronger team to prevent errors, and you can also be efficient. Plus the baseline knowledge of any workers, not only physicians, nurses, and lab techs, pharmacists, will be elevated. So the quality of the care should be higher. And of course, that pushes doctors to study more. They have to they have to know more. So I believe that's the second point. Oh, and let me add the third point. And my expectation, probably it's already happening, but the third point would be the patient will be equipped with AI too. Just as Google entered the scene, patients started Googling about their own diseases and treatments and prognosis. Now the patients will be doing the homework using general AI services like ChatGPT or Gemini to learn more about their own health conditions and treatment options. So doctors have to have one or two notches above. So just like in the days of Google, we had database like ClinicalKey, and I don't want to say that, but like UpToDate and Dynamed, doctors needed those professional tools to look things up while patients using Google and Wikipedia. And I believe the same thing happens. So if the patient does search on ChatGPT and comes in and your doctors and nurses know less about the disease, they will be disappointed. So the hospitals will have the responsibility to equip their clinicians with more specialized knowledge than patients can get from ChatGPT. I hope those 3 points answered your question.
Another question. When this ClinicalKey AI gives us information, is it possible that it does not cover enough databases such as Medline, PubMed, UpToDate, etc., so that there are still some information gaps in clinical application?
Oh, wow. It is a very valid concern. If I'm understanding this question right, at least my understanding of your concern is the primary literature, the primary research papers that are published can be quite controversial, right? Like there could be other conflicting studies in the same field, and the consensus might not have been reached. Or the research might look convincing for a moment, but in a few months, another study might come in that has a conflicting result. And we don't want physicians to be confused by that. So that's why currently CKAI has a very structured algorithm. So it employs generative AI technology, but it also combines the technology with another called vector search. And we have a specific algorithm, and it goes down to a certain database that is called POC content, point of care content, within ClinicalKey. And it is very frequently updated, and it covers the very basic recommendations per guideline, so to speak. And if that's not deep enough, then the engine goes a bit deeper and taps into a series of like dozens of review article journals called the Clinic series. And it has very deep, meticulous review on high yield topics in virtually all specialties of medicine and surgery. So you have like cardiology and gastroenterology, hepatology, orthopedics, plastic surgery, abdominal surgery, emergency medicine, critical care, and nursing, and even veterinarian care. And it goes into very specific details. And if you're interested, you can go to theclinics.com, or you can just Google the clinics Elsevier, and you will see how wide and deep the coverage is. And for those data sources, the world-class experts, just as I mentioned in the learning section, they review the recent articles. They usually the citation is usually about 100 articles are cited in each topic, and they do very in-depth literature search to make sure it's current and it harmonizes and reconciles the conflicting evidence. So that's the second layer. And even if that's not enough, the engine goes to primary literature. But usually, most clinical questions that we encountered will be solved in the first or second layers. I hope that's a line of question that you had in mind.
You see, a lot of people are interested, and they ask a lot of questions. There are from Charles Tai. He asked 3 questions. The first one is, are the generated evidence rated as to the strength of evidence by USPH task force, for example? The second one is, any graphic or curves or other pictures generated? The third one is, have the generated evidence been verified by human? What and how is the methodology of verification?
Okay, thank you for wonderful questions. Let me tackle them one by one. The first point, the, I guess, grading question, the AI, unless you specifically ask, doesn't grade its recommendations. I believe like many clinical guidelines employ this grade recommendation structure or architecture, and it actually involves human voting, actual human expert voting. So it is not possible by AI alone. But if the source data is citing clinical guidelines or such that have already included grade recommendation levels, it can be surfaced. So in short, as long as it's in the data source, it can be accessed, but the AI does not do the grading, evidence grading automatically. It's still our job, which is good news, I believe. And the second point, graphics. Thank you for asking this. I'm fighting for this internally. Actually, I want graphics. Actually, I'm not bad mouthing it, but I've once tried like ChatGPT and other general AI service to create algorithm to differentiate anemia or something, and it was completely useless. It looked very pretty, but it made no use. And what we need is peer-reviewed like algorithms and tables. I guess that's what you're referring to, or a specific picture of X-ray, MRI, or skin lesion pathology, something like that. And all the clinicians within Elsevier, want it from the bottom of their hearts because that's quick. When you're having like let's say, I don't know, arrhythmia patient coding in emergency room, and you don't have time to read. You want the algorithm. So that's what we're fighting for. But the good news is, now, as long as you click on one of those references, you can easily find a good table and or algorithms. So it's still quite useful. But as you mentioned, we still have a room for improvement. I guess that's the same thing for all the language models across the board right now, like medical and non-medical. And third part, how do we verify that our answers are correct? And there are actually 2 systems sitting in ClinicalKey AI. One is we employ a group of we have employed a group of external physicians, like hundreds of them, from many different specialties, and asked them to punch in questions and made sure that the answers were answer quality was good enough. if the answer was correct or if the answer was relevant. So that's the homework we have already done before releasing this product. So we have a baseline reassurance in terms of answer quality. After all, this is Elsevier. And the second system is the feedback group. So you might have noticed it when I was doing the video demo, but you have like thumb up and thumb down icons. And whenever you see something inaccurate or irrelevant, you can click the button and give us feedback. And we have a central team monitoring those feedback 24, I don't know, 24/7. Could be they were taking off on weekends. I hope so. But not only they fix that specific problem, but they step back and take a look at the overview algorithm to make sure similar problems don't happen in similar type of questions in other fields. So those are those are two mechanisms. And one more would be we try to limit our source to high quality database. So as I mentioned earlier, this is a combination of two technologies, generative AI and vector search. So regular chatbots like ChatGPT, basically they are trained on random internet, like general internet data, and it doesn't get updated. And you have no idea what it might say. Even if you pose the exact same question, they can answer differently. But our clinical AI or ClinicalKey AI basically uses AI to understand your question and generate answers from searched results. So the searching part is built differently. And when we do the searching, as I mentioned before, we have like layer 1 for clinical overview, point of care clinical overview. And then we go down to the clinic series. And then we go down to abstracts of all the primary articles. But we even limit that part to high quality, high impact factor journals. So the original data source is completely different from general chatbots. Our original data source is limited to high quality, high impact factor peer review journals or high quality review journals. So those are the three mechanisms that we ensure that the answer quality is valid in real clinical practice.
One more question. What is the pricing model, and is there limits to usage like with many of the other LLMs?
Pricing model. I guess this question can be better handled by somebody else, maybe Tracy. I guess that this differs from country to country. I guess this was first released in the US, but I believe the pricing model is different from country to country or region to region. So I'm not here to answer the question. Tracy, is there anybody who can answer the question right away, or we should get in touch with him later?
We will have sales team to answer that question, maybe later. We will have someone to contact you. Okay. I think that's all for our question, and our time is up. So thank you all for joining today's webinar. I believe we all gained valuable insights from Dr. Imula's presentation on how ClinicalKey AI can enhance medical decision-making. Thank you once again for your participation, and we look forward to seeing you at future events. 非常感谢大家参加今天的线上直播，相信我们都从 Dr. Imula 的分享中获益良多。感谢各位今天的参与，我们期待在未来的活动中再次与您见面。谢谢。Thank you, Dr. Imula.
Thank you very much for your participation and interest.
Thank you.